Thank you very much, everybody, once again for joining us for the latest of our climate action forums. If I've not met you before, my name's David Kelly and I'm Scotland Director at CTA. We are having this event today as part of our climate action programme, which you may be aware that we launched at the start of 2023, trying to look at ways in which we can better support our members to not just transition to electric vehicles, but also to take other types of community-led climate action. So we've been holding some of these forums, we've been providing training, we've been conducting research, we've been producing briefings and resources around things like e-bike schemes, complying with low emission zones, as well as trying to push for better funding opportunities for the sector and support that funding when it is available. And through the research that we have done with members, one of the key topics that's come up again and again is charging infrastructure for electric vehicles of one kind or another. When we asked members whether they had electric vehicles, but also why they maybe didn't yet have EVs, the biggest barrier they identified was funding and the affordability of EVs. But the second most common barrier that they cited, on 29%, was a lack of local charging infrastructure. And some of the feedback we got around that was maybe related to the charging network, but some of that was also about potentially a lack of knowledge or understanding or awareness of what was out there or what was required for the certain types of vehicles they might want to transition to. So hence why we're having this session today. We're really pleased to be joined by Gary McRae, Business Development Manager at Evolt Charging, who's going to talk us through a kind of overview of what Scotland's EV charging network looks like. Gary needs to leave us at 2:30, so we're hoping we'll have time to get through his presentation and then also a chance for any questions or comments that you might want to make to Gary before he has to head off. And then we'll go to Gordon Manson, Programme Manager at Energy Saving Trust, who is going to talk us through a bit of advice and information on charging options, what support is out there, including from EST. And again, that'll be followed by a chance for Q&A. And I'll just quickly then wrap things up with any kind of next steps or follow-up we've identified, but also a bit of a quick update from CTA perspective. So I will stop sharing there and without further ado, pass over to Gary to get things off.
Thank you very much. Yep, I'll just share my screen with you. Hopefully you can all see that now, can you?
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me along today. Yeah, my name's Gary McRae. I work for Evolt Charging. Today is a little bit of a dual conversation. So we, Evolt Charging, we'll go in a bit of about us through the slides, but we also manage the ChargePlace Scotland network on behalf of the Scottish Government at the moment. So we have two hats, but very much everything to talk about today kind of covers both of those fields. So today we're going to talk about who we are, what we do, the different sectors we work in, the products we offer, and a case study on how we implement that for different buses and public transport. So a little bit about my background, just to say why am I going to talk to you. So I was a fleet manager at Dundee City Council for 7.5 years. Did some of the community transport in there. We used to run a shoppers bus. We implemented a couple of buses called the Blether bus, where we went around local areas and underutilised minibuses, just picking people up and letting them go and have a chat and taking them to the shops or the doctors or anything like that. And then following that, I was a consultant in the electric vehicle field, where I did a lot of work around car clubs, community buses, right across the whole of the UK and right up to the north of Scotland. So kind of got a bit of a background in fleet management, a lot of electric vehicles throughout the last 13 years, and also a little bit of background in community transport and how that works. So yeah, today we'll hopefully go through and give some information and guidance. So Who we are, we're Evolt Charging, so we offer an end-to-end solution to everybody. So that starts at the advice, starts at the guidance, starts at helping people on that journey, starting on the journey, right through on the supplying of the infrastructure to then managing it for the 10 or 15 years that the charging infrastructure may be in the ground. We were started 13 years ago, right at the very beginning of the EV world, and the team that started the company, Justin, is still with us today. So it's a company who's been involved in EVs for a lot of years, got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience as well, which is very useful for people, because it can be a kind of bit of a daunting starting process. So yeah, hopefully I'll talk you through some of the things to think of today and some of the solutions that we offer. So for those of you that don't know, Swarco, Evolt Charging is part of the Swarco group. That stands for the Swarovski Group. So we're owned by the people who own the diamonds that you see in the streets. The question's always asked, how did they get into smart parking, EV charging? So it started back in 1969, where they took the offcuts of the crystal that they cut and they put them in paint to line the roads so it was more reflective. And that started their very journey on that. So we're wholly owned by the family and been going for 50 years, a well-established company with a global reach that you see there and a revenue of over £1 billion in the last year. So yeah, huge company with a lot of history behind them. So what do we do? Like I said, we kind of talk about our process for any of our clients or customers, and this is whether we ChargePlace Scotland or with our own networks, and we also run networks for other people, is that design stage. So what is it you're trying to do? For organizations like yourselves, the very starting point is, okay, like what vehicles am I going to put on the road? Is it a bus, a coach, a minibus, a car, a taxi? What kind of vehicle is it? Which is very important, because I'd love to stand here and say that every vehicle takes the same type of charger and the same power of charger, but they just don't. Every vehicle is slightly different. So that's very important that you understand what vehicles you're looking at the start. Is your infrastructure going to be a private or public? Again, there's regulations. If it's a public network, there's some very more stringent regulations coming out now from the government under the new regulations. If you're just keeping it for your own use, a lot less stringent, and you can do a lot more different things with it. How often are you going to charge the bus, the car? How far is it going to go? Really important things to consider, because this equipment can be expensive, so you want to make the best use of your money. So obviously try to maximize your money and make the best choices of infrastructure that you can use it for the most. All our equipment that will come across is compatible with all different vehicles, makes and models. Every new vehicle that has to come out has to be tested with every type of charger to make sure that it communicates properly together. With us having running ChargePlace Scotland, which has over 3,000 charge points in Scotland, we have 13 different manufacturers, all being tested, all being verified in our system again. So just that understanding that vehicles and chargers need to speak to each other, and the language is evolving all the time. So once we've identified what kind of vehicles you're wanting to have, we then can look at what types of chargers that you might want to put on it. We have a team of in-house planners and designers that can come into your depot, that can do public spaces. We do bus depots. We can come in and design the whole solution for you from end to end. We can integrate all our solutions with solar generation, with battery storage, with load management as well, so that if you're looking to power your vehicles from a building supply, we can integrate that. We can manage to make sure the lights don't switch off in the building. All those clever things can be done with all the technology. So we manage that whole process and that whole integration. We have a wide range of solutions what will come on at the moment, just talking about the different technologies that we offer. And yeah, we're compliant with all the current regulations that are out there. And like I say, that the regulations are ever evolving in this field. So once we've designed it, we then install it. And the final bit is that delivering it. So if you put a charge point in the ground, you'd expect it to last at least 8 to 10 years. Somebody has to do the maintenance on that, the annual inspections, anything that goes wrong. So we have a team of 50 plus field engineers, and we have a range of SLAs, so we can respond very quickly or a lot slower depending on the price. We have a call centre which is based in Scotland here, where there's people at the end of the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year, to be able to help drivers, to help owners, anything like that. They can do a lot of the technical fixes, which we'll come on to shortly. And the last one, yeah, finally on that, but we have experience of running operational critical infrastructure. We've installed lots for local authority public fleets. We've done buses, we've done blue lights. So we really understand that if you're running a service, obviously the charging part of it becomes part of that service that you're offering. And if you can't charge your vehicle, then you can't offer the service. So fully understand the critical nature of that solution. So what sectors do we work in? We work, like I said, the public sector. That was probably where we started quite a lot. We support a number of the major charge point operators who operate public networks across the UK. Like I say, we run ChargePlace Scotland, which is the biggest network in the UK. So we run that for the Scottish Government at the moment. We have done e-bus and e-truck projects. So we've got a case study of an e-bus project down in South Yorkshire, where we've installed some infrastructure recently. I've done a lot of work with Volvo recently on a truck depot as well. We look at fleet. So if you're a larger community organisation that's got a fleet of vehicles, we look at that, how we can optimise the infrastructure you've looked at, how we can look at returning to home. So if some of the vehicles are taken home, what solutions can we install that mean the vehicle can charge at home, but the driver's not maybe billed for the electricity that is used. And finally, workplace. We do a lot of work in buildings and schools and larger organisations like that, where often these community vehicles can be placed. So we'll work across all sectors. So once you've decided you want to do it, the hardware, the choice is endless. This is the range that Evolt Charging offers. So we start at the left-hand side with AC charge points. They are quite standard at the moment in the industry. So they're a Type 2 connection. Most vehicles come with a cable that connects the vehicle to the car. We can install these from a range from 7 kilowatts up to 43 kilowatts. And they do require an onboard inverter in the vehicle. And some vehicles that we have seen come to the market don't have an onboard inverter. So that's important just to be checking these things. What type of charger can your vehicle take when you get it? We then have units that are posts. We have the Dry, the Stina, which are wall-mounted units. We have products like the Evolt Touch, which has got a large 32-inch digital display screen on it that can be used for advertising. We then have our what we call rapid DC charging points, ranging from 50 to 240 kilowatts at the moment, but with chargers coming later on this year up to 400 kilowatts in that kind of range. And we also offer specifically for buses and coach operators a kind of pantograph solution, and obviously that plug and go charger, which is more a mobile solution, which works in some depots. If you have a 3-phase commando socket, you can plug that in and then charge the vehicles. So we have a full range. So it's really important, if you're trying to decide which charge type to go for, is how often do I need to charge my vehicle? What mileage is it doing? What's the battery size? And also the power that it can take, because not every vehicle can take 240 kilowatts. Majority of cars at the moment are around about 80. Majority of buses are around about 120 kilowatts for chargers. So while there's a kind of a race to the highest power type unit in the industry, there's sometimes that can be installing something that's not really required because the vehicle can't take that technology at the moment. So it's really important you speak to people about what vehicles you're getting, how often you want to charge them, like I say, the speed that they can take, and really understand your duty cycles, when you're going to be charging. Are you going to be charging overnight? If you are, you can do it slowly. Or you're looking for a top-up charge in the middle of a day, then you need something with higher power. So really important that you kind of get the right charger for the right vehicle and the right job, the right whatever you're undertaking with that vehicle. It's really important to make sure that they match. Once you've decided on the vehicle type, yeah, then we've installed the charge point. Then the next thing that comes with this, kind of three key parts. You've got your hardware. The second part is the software. So that's the kind of the back office, as we call it, the computer system that manages your charge points. So that can manage public and private networks. So we, as again said, we run ChargePlace Scotland network, which has 129,000 customers. We manage all the payments for them every day, and we manage fleets within that. So we've got real experience of running those significant networks. And the software that we have is constantly being developed. Obviously, this industry is moving quickly, but the software that they offer just now, you can set tariffs. You can set them for your own vehicles. So to charge for free, you can then say, well, okay, NB coming to use my charger, it's charged at a set kilowatt hour rate. These can be time-based or they can be group-based, very flexible within the system. You can also install things like overstay fees. So a lot of the infrastructure that's public at the moment has overstay fees in it. So again, just making sure that the right vehicles are on the right charger. So if you have a rapid charger, you don't really want somebody sitting on it for 10 or 12 hours. You want them to use it for about 45 minutes to an hour and then go off. So one of the best ways to manage that is through overstay fees, which we allow to do. Our software and our hardware joined together has many different payment methods. So you can pay with an RFID card. We can accept app payments, and we can accept web pay, where you just scan a QR code on the charge point and then it takes you to a secure payment method. And a lot of the charge points that we are installing these days have contactless payment on it. Just means that anybody can turn up as you would do with your own card and tap and pay and go on. So those things are really important, again, to think who's going to be using my network, how are they going to pay, how do we recover their money. We have fail-safes within the network connections. Obviously, every charge point is connected to the network through a phone signal. What if the phone signal went down for any reason? How do we back that up? We can either store the session data within the charge point and then upload it when the charger gets connection. We can put it on free vend, so it just offers free electricity to everybody, or we can cut it off altogether. And the networks that we have, so obviously we have our own network, which is called eConnect or Evolt charging, where any member can use any of our chargers across the UK, and that includes using our sister brands like ChargePlace Scotland. But we also have roaming agreements with people like Allstar Cards and Power and Octopus, some of the leading names, so that people with these only need the one card and they can use access right across the network. So we've recently done some work with the marketing team, so you can travel the length of the UK just using our one card from us, and there's enough charges across there. So again, thinking about where are you going to be going? Do you need a charge at the other end? It's okay saying you put a charge in your own depot, but do you need a charge at the other end as well? So which networks may they be? What kind of chargers? How do you sign up to that? All important. And then finally, the third piece, like I say, you've got the hardware, you've got the software, then you look at the service and the maintenance piece. And this bit's kind of often overlooked, but actually it's more important than the first two bits. The first two bits should be fine, they should work. You buy a charger, it should charge vehicles. You buy software, it should do what it's meant to do. This next bit about service and maintenance, and that's not just in year one, that's in years 1 to 10, making sure the charge point lasts for the length of time that you need it. So we offer a service and maintenance package where the maintenance includes 2 preventative visits a year, pretty much like your boiler gets serviced. We come out, we check everything, we take photographs, we upgrade any firmware or software, make sure the charger's in good condition and give it a bit of a clean. So we do that preventative maintenance. And then we have kind of 3 tiers of support that we offer. So the first is that call center I mentioned. We have 50 staff manning that phone 24 hours a day. That's all they do. They're not a call center for a variety of different services. They're a call center for electric vehicles only. So they're experts in it. They know what to do. They can help you I think it's around about 90% of the calls that come in, 80 to 90% of them we're solving at that first stage. They can unstick cables, they can unlock cables, they can reboot the charge point, they can do a number of things remotely just to help the driver get on. If they can't fix it, we then have a technical support team who again can remotely dial in, and they've just got a bit more technical knowledge, and again they're fixing about 85% of the faults that they have. And finally, if that doesn't work, we have a team of 50 plus field engineers that can go out and fix them. So that kind of full package of understanding, if you are going to look at charging infrastructure, it's the hardware, it's the software, and it's the ongoing maintenance and maintaining of that is really important to keep your operations going. Yeah, finally, just a case study. So yeah, we've installed some charge points for South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority recently. So we've put in some static units, and we're just in the process of installing a pantograph unit. So kind of that gives us experience of working in depots, bus depots, fleet depots, which we've already had as well, and just gives us that knowledge to understand how we make sure operations continue while people are transitioning to electric vehicles. And that's kind of quickly run through from us. Like I say, we're here, we can help, or we'd like to speak to anybody at any point in that assistance. I've done that fleet transition myself. It is quite complicated and can be quite daunting, kind of a lot of things to think about and a lot of messages out there. So yeah, we're here to help and guide people through that process. We want people to buy the right chargers in the right location for the right job that makes the operation of their vehicles straightforward. So yeah, happy to answer any questions if you have at the moment.
Great, thanks very much, Gary. I appreciate that. It'd be really useful for us to learn a bit more about what you're doing, particularly on ChargePlace Scotland, and get a bit more understanding, I suppose, about the context of where the industry is moving and what some of the technology and considerations look like. So, yep, over to you, Gordon, for your presentation.
Right, I'll just share screen. One second. Let me know when that pops up.
Yeah, we can see that. That's great.
Good to go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. That was a great presentation from Gary there. It's a really good introduction to everything. There might be a little bit of overlap here and there, but I'll try and fill in a couple of gaps from the Energy Saving Trust side of things. So, as I said, my name's Gordon Manson. I'm a program manager from the technical team at Energy Saving Trust. So today I'll give you a bit of an overview of our thinking in terms of depot charging, with a bit of a focus on community transport, or my best attempt at it anyway. So I'll quickly spin through a few slides for you. So just to set the scene in terms of who we are, hopefully some of you may know us. I think there's been mention of the Plugged In Communities Grant Fund that hopefully some of you managed to access over the last few years. But Energy Saving Trust, just to give you a bit of an overview, we're an organisation that's pretty much dedicated to tackling the climate emergency. So we're independent. And we're there to basically, I'll read the blurb. So we empower millions of householders to make better energy choices, and we deliver transformative energy programs working with governments, and we support businesses with energy efficiency strategies, research, assurance, and communications, basically helping them play their part in developing a sustainable future. But in a nutshell, we're just geared towards tackling the climate emergency at all angles: domestic customers, businesses, working with government. The team I work with, the transport team in Scotland, I've been there for the last 6 years. My team in particular have done a lot of work with public sector, so helping the local authorities, NHS, other big fleets, try and decarbonise their fleets and make progress towards the fleet decarbonisation targets that the Scottish Government has set them. So we've done a bit of depot analysis, a lot of kind of fleet analysis on that front as well. The other side of my team look at the public charging network. So similar to what Gary was mentioning recently, we've been trying to pull together best practice guidance in designing the public charging network in terms of a whole range of elements, whether it be in rural settings, looking at accessibility, a whole range, just basically trying to pull together the best practice information on public charging into one resource to help the guys that are developing the network to build the best possible public charging network. So that's the kind of work my team's involved in. So we'll quickly move on to the kind of topic for today. Gary's obviously already given a whole range of the charger options that are available through Evolt. But in terms of the first question that came to me in terms of thinking about it from a community transport side of things is the type of charger that you'll need. And again, Gary's kind of touched on this, and it's important to consider what your needs are, and not to overspec the site or try and go too high in terms of power rating if you don't actually need it for your operation. So a lot of this is basically about analyzing what it is you do at the moment, the vehicles you have at the moment, and fitting the infrastructure to meet your needs in an affordable way. In most cases, what we call fast chargers, so the 7 or 22, probably 22 in the case of the community transport side of things, will be quite a good option to cover many of the vehicles that you might likely be using. I know community transport operators vary in scale, so some will be running large fleets and others will be running 1 or 2 vehicles. So just to give a sense of the next slide gives a bit of a sense of the price of these chargers. This is based on some of the funding we've delivered over the last year or so. So if we are looking at 22 kilowatt chargers or even 7 kilowatt, if that's possible, a single socket 7 kilowatt will be about £1,800 to purchase and install that unit, whereas a 22 kilowatt unit is about £1,000 more, about just over £3,000 for a 22 kilowatt single socket unit. Another 1,500 if you want to make it a double socket unit for so you can maybe charge 2 vehicles at the same time. But if you go up to some of the higher powered units, I know Gary mentioned there's some units that are well above 50 kilowatt now. But if you look at a 50 kilowatt unit, you're looking at about £40,000 to install that. The challenge you're going to see is not only just the cost of the unit, it's the available power you have at your sites as well, which I'm sure a number of you have actually kind of explored. And that's one of the key things I'm keen to kind of recommend that people do. As Gary mentioned as well, it's also important to kind of consider the vehicles you're going to be running, and therefore what kind of chargers you might need. I went through the list of some of the plugged-in community grant fund recipients over the last year or two to see which were the most popular vehicles that have been kind of requested through that scheme. And these are the models that kind of top the list. So we're looking at the likes of Mercedes E-Vitos, the Fiat E-Ducato, the Vauxhall Vivaro E, the Ford E-Transit, which is getting quite a good write-up as well, and the Maxus E-Deliver 9 as well. So I'm sure many of you are fully aware of these model options. The important thing is, as Gary mentioned, is what we call the onboard charger, or the part of the vehicle that determines how much charge it can take, and that'll basically determine the type of charger it makes sense to try and charge it with. So if you are going to run AC chargers, for example, a 22 kilowatt unit or a 7 kilowatt unit, as you can see on this table here, I've got the 5 models that were just pictured in the last slide. And the bit that I've highlighted in yellow is the onboard charger rating of each vehicle. And that'll tell you the maximum amount of power that vehicle can take from the charging unit. So the key point is that there's not an awful lot of point in trying to charge something with a 22 kilowatt unit if the vehicle can only accept 7 kilowatts an hour, because you're just wasting the power that it should be taking. From this kind of very basic analysis, looking at those 5 models, 3 out of the 5 models can take 11 kilowatts or more from AC. So it does kind of suggest that for the minibus or large people carrier vehicles with quite sizable battery packs from 50 kilowatt up to 100 kilowatt, I would say that a 22 kilowatt charger probably makes quite good sense. For most of those vehicles can accept 11 kilowatts and above, which will kind of give you a kind of charging time. If you look at I've got the charging time on the right-hand column of this table here, for example. For the Mercedes with a 100 kilowatt battery, you're looking at about 10 hours to charge that vehicle on what would be a 22 kilowatt charger, but the vehicle's only accepting 11 kilowatts per hour. Whereas the Fiat E-Ducato minibus, because it can actually take a full 22 kilowatt per hour charge, it'll take you 4 hours to get you the 80 kilowatt battery pack fully charged. So it's just something to bear in mind. I think 22 kilowatt is probably a sensible route, unless if you have the funding to put your own rapid charger in place on site and have enough power to do that. But there also is logic to run on the lower powered units, the 22 kilowatt or even 7 if you have enough downtime to make it work. Because it means that you can quite often squeeze in a number of chargers with a limited power supply in your depot site. And you can maximize the number of hours you have during the night that you can charge that vehicle. So there's no spikes in energy usage. You can kind of spread the energy usage over a longer period of time, which makes quite good sense if it fits your operation. The one thing about 22 kilowatt charging is you'll need 3-phase electricity supply on that site. So not every site that you're operating from will have 3-phase power. So it's something you'll have to check out with your energy supplier to see whether that's something you have at the depots or the sites that you're operating from at the moment. In terms of working out how many chargers you might need, these are just some of the basic questions that are worth considering. It's just how many vehicles you're running fundamentally. So how many chargers you might need. You don't necessarily need a single charger per vehicle though, because if money as it is across the board very tight, we're always looking for efficient ways of doing things. Then we are looking at people that can share vehicles. So it can be possible for multiple vehicles to share a single charging point, depending on how many miles of range those vehicles have to do, what their operating patterns are, and the size of the battery in those vehicles as well. So it's worth kind of analyzing all those elements to see how efficient you could be without having to spend. So to minimize the amount of money you have to spend on putting infrastructure in the ground, because it's not cheap to do. The vehicles aren't cheap, but the infrastructure is not particularly cheap either. So it's important that we try and be as efficient with it as we can. And we've seen public sector fleets, particularly some of the users of cars and things in the public sector fleets, their mileages are relatively low. So some vehicles could charge once, twice a week, realistically, with the amount of range on some of those vehicles now. So there is benefit in kind of looking at that to see how efficient you can be with the vehicles you're charging. The kind of analysis we do, if you have got larger fleets, we have done this where we basically convert the diesel use and approximate, and we can work out pretty accurately how much energy a full fleet will need and compare that with the available energy you have at your site, which is the next point I'm going to come on to, just so that you can match up the infrastructure you're proposing to put on site in a way that makes the most sense. So to come on to that briefly now, in terms of arranging an install on site, the first thing to do I'd recommend is confirming the power capacity of your site, and that means contacting your distribution network operator, whether that be Scottish Power or Scottish and Southern Energy, and they'll be able to tell you how much power is coming through the cable into your site, so the maximum power you have attributed to your site. And you can see on the small chart we've got one of our example charts here that we put in some of the reports that we do, and this is basically using half-hourly energy data that anyone can request from their energy supplier. So you just ask them to give you your half-hourly energy usage from your site over the last 12 months, and you can analyze that. I mean, you might not have the capacity to do this kind of chart, but if you can quite easily see what your maximum daily usage is. So you can see the peak power that's used on that site, whether it be the building and everything else that's running on that site. And then you can compare that with the total power that's available on that site. And in a basic sense, that the kind of yellow bar at the top of this chart shows the amount of spare power, that static spare power that's available on this particular site we were analyzing. So if you see the top line at the top, I don't know if you can read it, but there's a dotted line at the top that shows that the site's got 275 kilowatts of supply, whereas the top of these kind of gray waves is the maximum daily kind of peak of power usage, and that comes out at about 225 kilowatts, which means there's 50 kilowatts of spare power all day long to potentially be used for charging. So if you were that means you could straight away install 22 kilowatt chargers within that 50 kilowatt gap of available power without disrupting anything that's happening on site. So it's just useful to get that kind of analysis so you can see exactly what's available, because power upgrades to sites are very expensive. I don't know if anyone's explored that with DNOs in terms of upgrades to substations close to sites. It might not be something that many of you will have looked at, given quite a lot of the fleets you're running may be quite small. So the actual need for a kind of network upgrade might not be quite there. But we've seen a lot of variation in terms of how much spare power is available in different site locations. Some sites will have loads of spare power. It's fairly random. And other sites will be almost at capacity as it stands. So there could be some strategic decisions you might have to think about where vehicles are based on the available power, because the cost of an upgrade to the power supply to a site could be prohibitive. So it's worth collecting all this information to work out what the best options are. In terms of installing charge points, we've heard from Gary this afternoon already, and he's one of the potential charge point installers. Our recommendation, as always, would be to get as many quotes as you can, so you get a real sense for the kind of market rate, or that the offer that's available from the private sector for installing charge points, as I'm sure you would all do anyway. Another key thing to consider is ownership of the site. Many community transport operators may not own the site that they're operating from, so it's key to get authorization from the site owner and explore that with them. As I'm sure many of you maybe I'm talking to people that have already checked this out, but it's definitely a key part of the mix, is making sure that you'll have to get authorization from the site owner to get a charge point. And I would hope that many of them are amenable to that, because this is a sensible investment decision at this point in time. This is the only way transport is going, so it's only of benefit to pretty much any site that you put a charger in going forward. So I'd hope many of the site owners that you work with would be up for having chargers installed. And then finally, just explore the funding support available. There's nothing available through plugged-in communities as of yet this year, but I would advise you to keep an eye on the Energy Saving Trust website. It's not off the table completely, so do keep an eye on that. It's possible there may be support at some point, so we just haven't had anything confirmed as of yet. So I would keep an eye on that to see if there is support available for that, because obviously the cost of, as you're fully aware, the cost of this is quite challenging, particularly for the community transport space, where money is in short supply quite often. I would also recommend, as you're fully aware as well, tapping into peer knowledge as well. So as many of you already have suggested on the call today already, you're already operating electric vehicles. As a group, the Community Transport Association, I would highly recommend tapping into that peer-to-peer knowledge. We run forum sessions for the public sector, and one of the most important aspects of those forums is people that have already got over these challenges and actually implemented solutions, sharing that with people, with their colleagues in other organizations that are trying to tackle those. So I'm sure this might well be happening already within the CTA, but we'd highly recommend sharing as widely as possible success stories or challenges that people have experienced with introducing electric vehicles. There's a lot of positive. I had a look at some of the feedback from the Plugged In Communities Fund, and there has been quite a lot of positive feedback in terms of the implementation of the vehicles. I think the users really enjoy using them, and obviously people have managed to get chargers in place, getting over some of these barriers that I've just kind of mentioned. But yeah, I would just highly recommend people to speak to their colleagues and collect as much information as possible from people that have done that already. The next thing I wanted to touch on is kind of innovative approaches, and some of you may have looked at this already. And this, in a nutshell, is basically the concept of sharing. We're running a number of projects. We're watching one or two projects this year that are exploring the idea of public sector bodies sharing infrastructure. Because of the cost of infrastructure, it's becoming a bit of an imperative from the Scottish Government and Transport Scotland. They're keen to explore, and we're hopefully going to get a pilot site up and running, or really progress a pilot site this year to demonstrate how it can work. So the idea on this project that we'll be doing, we're looking at some of the environmental and forestry public sector bodies, and there's actually, I know is it Peter from Golspie on the call today. Golspie is one of the locations we might be exploring. We're in the process of, we're going to be looking for actual real world sites where we could potentially set up, or the government are keen to explore the idea of funding a site where we can show that multiple public sector bodies could share infrastructure. So that will initially be looking at potentially, I don't know, Scottish Forestry, SEPA, those kind of bodies, along with any kind of NHS trusts in the local vicinity. But community transport could be part of that mix as well. So we are looking for actual real world sites where we could bring people together and set up a sharing solution. So that includes the infrastructure, but also the back office software that Gary was mentioning, because the software nowadays allows multiple users to share the same unit, and they could potentially be paying a different rate per kilowatt. There could be a preferential rate for community transport operators, for example, but other users could be a slightly higher pence per kilowatt rate. So the idea with the sharing model is that it makes the business model for one site far stronger if you can slot in lots of different users using the units at different points in the day. And there's also the option of arranging booking systems as well, so people can be very clear as to when their kind of schedule, when they would like to charge, and we can try and be careful about how we slot people into that 24-hour window to make sure that we maximize the units. So it is a pilot project, something we're exploring just now, but I would highly recommend that you we'll keep abreast of how we're getting on, but I would highly recommend any of you just start thinking about partners in your respective areas, whether they be public sector or even private sector fleets, because they're all installing infrastructure. Everyone's doing it simultaneously at the moment. So there could well be opportunities for the community transport operators to tap into and piggyback on infrastructure that's right on their doorstep. So please do reach out to just start having conversations, if you're not already, with anyone that's in your vicinity, public or private sector, that's running electric vehicles or considering it, because there could well be good opportunities there to set up partnerships that could be a really economical way of decarbonizing your fleet, because you may not have to pay for the cost of installing infrastructure, and may get a good rate on the kind of electricity usage as well. The other side of that is, if you do have the funding to put your own chargers in, you could potentially offer them to the community and get a little bit of revenue back from those chargers, or other businesses or organizations could piggyback on your chargers as well if there are times of the day that you're not using them. As I said, the software allows you to potentially quite easily have an automatic charge, or set whatever rate per kilowatt you want, and there's a way of generating some revenue. So it's something to bear in mind, and I think this sharing model is something that's going to be an important thing we're going to build going forward. So definitely worth thinking about going forward. And in terms of advice and support from Energy Saving Trust, although, as I said, funding is not officially, there's not a huge amount of funding available at the moment, but there is advice support available. As I said, we're a kind of independent organization, so we've been pulling together what we think is kind of the best practice information for years. So there's a couple of sections of the website I've kind of highlighted here for you today. We have large chunks of our website are focused to kind of fleet decarbonisation and business transport. So I'd highly recommend checking out the hyperlinks I've included there, and having a flick around the various bits of advice, multiple case studies, lots of kind of useful information, hopefully that will just help kind of solidify your thinking, or maybe help channel your kind of strategies going forward. But yeah, hopefully that's of help. And then I suppose just in terms of takeaways from today, first point is, I think, as you might expect me to say, I think the progress you're making with decarbonisation is really important. So I think, although it's not a cheap thing to do, I think it's really, I mean, the climate emergency is not going anywhere. It's really important that everyone kind of does what they can. And although funding is getting tight, whatever we can try and decarbonise is really helpful. Try and collect learnings from other community transport operators that are already running fleets. I think I didn't mention Community Transport Glasgow, but there's some I'm sure you're fully aware. There's some of your peer group have done quite a lot of electric vehicle adoptions. There's a lot of learning that can be shared. So please do tap into that. I'd highly recommend doing that. In terms of the types of charger you probably want to consider at your depot sites, you're probably looking at a 22 kilowatt charger. Makes good sense if you're looking at the AC kind of affordable chargers on site. Please do ask for confirm the power supply you have available on site, and hopefully try and get your half-hourly energy usage so you can work out how many chargers you can quite easily slot into site. Check out the site ownership issue. Definitely kind of explore that avenue, and also keep an eye out for funding. But yeah, I think, yeah, keep a lookout for the sharing opportunities too, and look at our EST website for advice. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had to kind of cover off today. Hopefully there's a couple of ideas or points there that were helpful, but happy to take any questions anyone might have.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gordon. A lot in there that's really useful, and also, as you mentioned, lots of great stuff on the EST website for people to check out that is really practical bits of advice and information for folk to take away.